It is Thursday, February 27th. And this committee is still alive, but we're all struggling with a cold. But this morning, we're going to spend some time with Sharon Scott, who's the Chief Financial and Operating Officer for the Vermont State College System. So Sharon, why don't you come on up? We're talking about the boiler situation at VTC. For the committee, there's also money in our capital budget of about 5 million. Very short. For over the 2 years for a boiler replacement up in Johnson, at the Johnson campus. So we really need to get more of a background information on what's happening with the VTC situation and also figure out which of the two are more of a priority. So Sharon, it's all yours and welcome. Thank you for coming.
So, Madam Chair, thank you for inviting me. So for the record, I'm Sharon Scott, Chief Financial and Operating Officer for the Vermont State Colleges System. I appreciate having the opportunity to talk about this project. Just a little bit of background for you. I listened to the testimony from last week and had the opportunity to really think about and make sure that I fully understood the situation that we have at the Randolph campus. So in 2017, we entered into a 50-year ground lease with BGS to be able to allow them to be able to construct the environmental and ag lab at the Randolph campus, which was formerly Vermont Technical College. The lease itself is 50 years. It's $1 per year is the lease payment. So it's not touching too much of the state's coffers. And there is an additional 50-year optional lease that the state can enter into for the exact same rate. That plan for building the Vail Lab in Randolph included not only the building itself, which was intended to provide the opportunity to do a wide range of services that addressed human, animal, environmental health, while also promoting commerce, was also to create a standalone biomass plant. And that went through the full process of Act 250 permitting and had that additional opportunity to be able to provide all of the heating and steam needs for Vail with the potential for excess steam for the Randolph campus. In 2018, it became evident that that plant was not going to be ready in time for Vail occupancy. And an engineer from BGS identified that the VSC had excess capacity in the heating system at Vermont Tech, and we agreed. So we arrived at a temporary agreement between the state of Vermont, BGS, and Vermont State Colleges in order to provide heat to the Vail building. That agreement's purpose was simply to provide heat. It did not stipulate a specific pounds per square inch, nor did it stipulate any additional terms other than to say that we would provide the same level of heat to the Vail building that we provide to the rest of the campus. So that's what those terms were. It additionally identified for us what those services would be and how the VSC would be compensated. And the primary terms of the relationship were that the VSC would be made whole for the purchase of the steam. And so through a whole bunch of legal terms, but really what it works out to be is that each year we go through a process to identify exactly how much steam the Vail building is using, proportional to the total amount of steam that's being produced out of our plant. In the most recently completed fiscal year, because we only do this one time per year because the calculation is pretty arcane, it was 17.2% of all steam produced by our heat plant was generated and consumed by the Vail building.
17.2.
So that particular set of activities allowed us to be able to produce for Vail many of the things that they would need. The original temporary term was 3 years in order to be able to allow the opportunity for BGS to be able to build a biomass facility, and it was intended to be temporary. The expectation is that there would be optional 2-year terms, a contingent upon mutual consent between the parties, between the VSC and BGS. And it was scheduled to terminate when the biomass was completed It was confirmed that that plant met all of the needs for Vail and any excess requirements for the Randolph campus if they were determined, and that a new heat purchase agreement was established that would replace the existing one that we had in place. That building went online in 2019. And within the first year, it was very clear that the level of service that we could provide for the building, as well as the timing of those services and the type of service, was not consistent with the building's occupants. So for example, you heard last week from Director Aja that they identified that the autoclaves require 50 PSI. Our environment caps out at 48. And in fact, for our own campus, we actually produce to a maximum of 40 PSI and typically less than that. Additionally, you heard that Vail's needs for consistent access to steam during the summer months is important for a lot of reasons for the work that they do. But at that time, our boilers aren't functioning. We don't have a need to run steam between late April, early May, depending on how late our winter goes, and the end of September. You also heard that because of Vail needing heat, that we have been running our boilers during the summer months on a short cycle. And that short cycling actually limits the useful life of the boilers because they're not designed to do that. We're producing enough steam in order to be able to send it over to Vail, but then we're having to shut the boilers down. And you also heard from the lab director that we don't share with them when there's a change in the PSI or service. And that's because we are not operating at a 24/7 operation like a utility, nor was there an expectation that we would direct a specific PSI. So it's true that we're not equipped to provide the high pressure that Vail needs, and we are short cycling our boilers, and we are reducing the useful life of our equipment. We also don't run a 24/7 plant, and we don't monitor PSI. But we've partnered with BGS for these last few years to make sure that we provide the service as best as we can to the Vail building because it's important. And in fact, at the end of the first 3-year term, we actually approached BGS and said, we don't think we're able to provide you with the service that you need. And we recommended termination of the agreement. I think that might be what had triggered BGS's request to look at, looking at an alternative activity. We've met with members of the administration. They brought up when we were doing our budget hearing with them last fall that this was a proposal that was coming forward. And we shared that we're comfortable with a potential change if BGS needed to move their support for Vail into its own independent building. But it's our understanding that what BGS is proposing is installing summer boilers. Remember, again, the summer boilers are only to be used. And then modification of our existing boilers from number 4 fuel to number 2 fuel. And we believe that this is a really sound proposal because it addresses a few different issues. It addresses the short cycling, which is reducing the useful life of those boilers in that facility. It allows us to have greater energy efficiency, which not only reduces the cost for this VSC, but also the cost that the state of Vermont is paying to heat the Vail lab. And it also reduces the amount of cost that you would have associated with building a whole separate infrastructure for a biomass facility. So as I mentioned last year, BGS paid for 17.2% of all the steam that was produced. That amount was a little more than $235,000. And that was also inclusive of us needing to rent a boiler for the summer because we had to do some significant maintenance on those boilers in the summer, and yet we were still required to provide that steam to support the lab. And so it included the state paying for temporary boilers to be available in that summer of 2023 to support that particular work. So we roughly estimate that were we to replace our full heating plant within the Vermont State Colleges, specifically to support just the Randolph campus, that it would be about $10 million with a number 2 fuel oil system. And we roughly estimate that were we to replace it with a more energy efficient biomass or alternative fuel solution, that we'd be looking at probably around $16 million. We feel like this proposal that BGS has come up with to install summer boilers extends the useful life of those boilers by switching out from number 4 to number 2. and it lowers the cost. It would be really disingenuous for me to say that there's no benefit for the VSC. Obviously, there is. Being able to switch from number 4 to number 2, while it's still a fossil fuel, it burns cleaner, it's easier to achieve, and it's cheaper to run. But we also believe that this is really sound for the Vail facility because they will have the necessary steam that they need to run from May to the end of September. And they will have a more reliable solution that is available to them year round. So that's the background that I have on it. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have and also to debate the merits of Johnson versus Randolph. I will say the challenge for us is that we really believe strongly that the Vail building is important, but it is not the essential mission of the Vermont State Colleges. We're providing a service because we're being good partners for the Vail Lab and the state of Vermont, and we think it's really essential to the work that they do. We are not providing any additional educational opportunities for our students at the Vail Lab. I understand that was a question that you had last week. The services that we use, like water quality testing, are ones that we purchase just like every other occupant in the state of Vermont would purchase. So we take advantage of those services, but we pay for them just like everyone else.
Sean,
So the number, so you can get to your 50 PSI if you go to a number 2 fuel.
I think there's some additional engineering work that will need to be done with the implementation of what that looks like. We have attempted to run at 50 PSI because of the way our solution is designed. There isn't anything that splits from 50 to 40 or less. But we believe with some engineering work, we could provide both the 50 PSI and provide the 40 and less than 40 that we need for the campus so that we don't blow out our system, which is what can happen.
And just a quick follow-up, you said 16 million you needed to do this?
If we were to move to focus just on alternative fuel and to focus on our institute. If we were looking at replacing with number 2, we'd be looking at about $10 million. My understanding is that what BGS has proposed, that there's 3.5 million in the governor's recommend, and I believe 1.8 in a combination of funds from last year. And we believe, from having to talk with BGS, that they can accomplish what they need to support the Vail Lab, make sure that the activities are there, and do that for a significantly cheaper amount of money.
Troy.
And I think you stated it, but we may turn to Joe here in a second. What is the ultimate plan with regard to the biomass?
That is something that you'd have
Yeah.
to talk with Joe about.
This is still sort of a Band-Aid. Are you still moving towards biomass?
For the record,
For the summer boiler.
Yeah.
for the record, Joe Aiken, Director of Design and Construction with Buildings and General Services. What we're looking at first is really that summer boiler. Just
Yep.
so you guys, and then the study done back before Vail was constructed. VTC, I believe, had the study done, but I gotta find out for sure who requested the study and paid for it, but the study was done for biomass. And then there was also another one done for what we were looking at for doing a standalone facility. If we were to continue down the road of using the steam from the college, we would be building a second plant and building in that redundancy in our second plant. And the study back in the day said that there was roughly a 10-year payback by switching to biomass.
Yeah.
Now that study would have to be updated.
Yeah,
Right
that's my next question.
Right, and so we'd be looking at doing that, but the most important thing would be to do the summer boiler, so they don't lose a boiler, we don't lose a boiler. Do the short cycle.
So if you move to biomass, I've got a few questions off of that. One is, I know Burlington's reaction to the McNeil plant, for example, and it's not necessarily supportive of biomass as the public support for biomass changed since 2018. But you would, even if you continue to move towards a biomass plant, the summer boiler, you'd still be using the summer boiler or not?
Probably yes, because we wouldn't have the load that's required wouldn't be there for a chip. Or
Yeah. Okay.
If we went down to pellets, yes, but I wouldn't want to, the college need in the winter is really more for chips than it is for pellets.
Yeah.
And we are charged by statute to look at the life cycle costs.
I know.
And that's how we end up with chips, because that lives out a lot.
Yeah.
McNeil is electric, you know, their primary is electric. Our wood chips are for heat.
So it's the life cycle cost. I was trying to follow you. Is it a longer payback for mass? Or which one comes out better with the life cycle? Oil or wood?
When the study was done 10+ years ago,
Which is-
biomass had a 10-year payback. Roughly, I mean, that was quickly reviewing the report.
Right. So if doing the summer boilers now, which one, what are you looking at? Doing it with oil or doing it by?
Propane. And part of that reason being is they have number 4 fuel that they're burning and not number 2. If they had number 2 already in place, we would go with that.
So where would the summer boilers, we would own them, they'd be state-owned summer boilers?
That, we still have to have that discussion, because ultimate, from BGS's point of view, would probably be that the college owns and maintains it, it's in their plant, as opposed to BGS personnel going into their plant. And not that it happens, it's not intentional, the finger pointing of who does what, but at some point in time, if they lost a boiler, that summer boiler could also help provide steam to their plant in the coldest of needs. But that we'd still have to have those discussions on.
So how many summer boilers again? Is it two summer boilers?
I don't know that, we just hasn't looked at that, that just came about here after the bill was being assembled.
So the summer boilers would physically be placed at the VTC campus
Inside their existing boiler.
inside their existing boiler room.
I heard a question last week about how is it that we have excess space to be able to do such a thing? A good question. And so I asked, we use that particular space to store supplies for our plumbing, heating, and electrical. We have the ability to be able to relocate that storage to a different location. It's our maintenance facility that has our heat plant in it. So it has the ability to be able to flex where we put those things. So we do have the excess capacity within inside the building to be able to support their needs.
And then the other part of this plan is to convert their current boilers, VTC's current boilers, from number 4 to number 2. And we would still off season, not the summer seasons, but the regular fall and winter when your students are back. We would then be able to still pull the heat from their boilers for our lab.
Yes. The summer boilers are truly just for the summer because of the reduced load. Their boiler plan was designed to cover the whole campus. However, they do have, because of their boiler size and everything else, there are 3 boilers, they have some excess to pick up Vail. But during the summer, it's only required for Vail for dehumidification, hot water, and sterilization.
So those boilers during the winter time for the autoclave, can they produce 50 PSIs?
So our existing boilers, yes, we have the capability of being able to. We do need some engineering work, and we would partner with BGS on that to be able to assess how to isolate for what Vail needs for 50 PSI versus what the campus needs, which is under 40. We had attempted to run at 50 PSI because our boilers can run at that, but it's too much pounds per square inch for the rest of the campus and was causing problems elsewhere within our facility. So we had to throttle it back.
So to change from number 4 to number 2 for your boilers, what is involved? Do you change out the boilers completely?
Just the burners.
Just the
The
burners?
boiler itself, if I remember right, they're all tube boilers. So there's water running through them, and that's how you're getting your steam off the top of that as the heat's going through the tubes. So it's really the burners themselves on the end. And hopefully we can reuse the tanks that are in the ground by going in and cleaning them out of the number 4.
If they're not leaking. If they're not, how old
Fingers crossed. I'm not sure what their age is right now, but I certainly can find
are
out.
they lined?
I don't know.
They can't be single walled.
They get the double wall, yeah.
Well, depends how old they are.
I will find out. I do know that we've had projects over the last 15 years to replace out our tanks, simply to address making sure that we don't have leaks on our campuses. But I will find out.
Right?
This, I don't even know if it's a stupid question. It's the same line of reasoning of questioning. I want to ask how old are the boilers and what's the useful life left, but it sounds like there's so many different components that have been swapped at different times. Is that even a reasonable question?
So our existing boilers were installed in the late 1960s, early 1970s, very similar to the Johnson location, which were installed in the early 1960s, late 1950s. So they have some serious age on them.
Yeah.
And they do require a significant amount of care and feeding, in part because of the fact that they are number 4, where the oil itself is thicker, it is harder to control. It's just from a viscosity perspective, it's much more difficult within those. So moving to number 2, while it's still fossil fuel, but while moving to number 2 allows some of those things to ease up on some of the issues related to the inner workings of the machines themselves.
So if you're, if we didn't have this agreement with VTC in the lab and you were on your own, would you be looking at replacing these boilers?
We would prioritize Johnson first. And that's when we had spoken with the administration back in November, we were asked a very similar question. And from our perspective, the Johnson boilers were a greater need. That being said, we understand the significance of the needs that the Vail lab has as well. So this project is also of significant importance. If you had to make a choice between them, you obviously have a very difficult one before you. The Vail lab very directly supports the needs of the state. And that heat plant also supports the needs of that campus. We anticipate that we would be coming forward with a project in a future biennium for the Randolph campus. So if you have to make a choice between one or the other, you'll have to make the policy decision about what that looks like. But from our perspective, we felt that Johnson was important, and we recognized that BGS also felt that Randolph was important to be able to support Vail. Specifically, the way it was posed to us was that as specifically a standalone facility to support the Vail lab. And we were very supportive because we know that the way that it's currently operating is rapidly accelerating the issues related to that particular campus. And so our ability to be able to have BGS address that so that we can extend the useful life significantly into the foreseeable future is one that we felt was really valuable.
James?
Just to clarify, so twice you mentioned talking to the administration, just so I know who's talking to you. Do you mean the government administration or the school administration?
The governor's administration,
You put together the
Yeah,
when we put together.
I
our
just want to make sure. I thought so, but I was.
Yeah, no.
Could be-
I am the administration.
I was like, well, you know, the president.
For the VSC,
Yeah.
I'm a finance person.
Yeah.
Yeah, the governor's administration.
Okay. So they know. Okay.
So if your current boilers to change it from 4 to 2, to change the burners. Down the road in 2 years, if you do that switch over, and then you need to replace the boilers, can those burners be used in the new boiler?
I'm not 100% sure. Probably though. That's a tank question.
Right. And our expectation is that
Is he skiing?
Can you ask that again? I didn't. What did you say?
Yeah. To switch these boilers
Mhm.
at VTC from number 4 to number 2 order,
Oh,
all you're doing is changing the burners.
yeah.
And say you put in the new burners.
Yep.
What years after that, you gotta replace the boilers.
Gotcha. Okay.
And into the new boilers, can you use those burners that you put in?
Gotcha.
I'm so glad that I don't have a voice, you don't have to hear me.
I think we don't know the answer. I think most likely, yes. Our hope and expectation is by doing this work now, we can extend that beyond 2 years, maybe 6, 8, 10 years, and we can continue to fail needs. But without looking at what a formal engineer study looks like, it would be difficult to know. But from our conversations about what this project would look like, we believe that it will extend that out so that I would not be coming forward in 2 years, making a request to replace those boilers in Randolph. I might reserve the right to come about another campus, but it wouldn't be about, I don't think it'll be about Randolph.
So right now, with the FY 26 of 3.5 million, in combination with what you've had in FY 24 and 25, you're at 5.3 million. Is that gonna get us there'd be 2 summer boilers?
I'm not 100% sure because I haven't. This came in as the capital bill was being put together, and I have not talked with the colleges about that would look like.
You mean for the summer,
For the summer boilers,
So you don't know if it'd be 1 or 2 or 3?
correct. I don't know.
So my question is the 5.3 million,
3.5.
5.3. In combination, if you go to this,
Oh, got it. Yeah, I'm with you.
1.8.
I'm with you.
they've had 1.8 previous and then 3.5. It's 5.3. Is that 5.3 gonna give us the summer boilers and give us the burners to switch from 4 to 2?
I don't know.
Was the 3.5 in addition to the 1.8 from the previous biennium? When the budget was put together by the 5th floor, was that anticipating doing our own heating system?
It started out when we had the previous funding, and this funding was for a standalone. And at the very last minute, as capital bill was being put together, the conversations with the administration, I believe that is when it switches to why build a standalone facility when this too could be helping out the colleges along with providing the steam to Vail.
What was the projected cost of a standalone? Do you remember?
I would say it was around 5 million was our best estimate at the point in time. And that is projecting the cost of inflation from the deduct alternate we took at the construction time of the plant. We did, our permitting looks to be the same, as long as we don't change the outside of the building or the size of the boiler and like so that, but we would have to comply, I believe, not 100% sure, as to the new energy code and what that would do with the insulation of the building. Oddly enough, we still have to comply, even though that in a heat plant, we're looking to actually get rid of the excess heat that's in the building. And we have vents to do that, but we still have to comply with the insulation. Nice. So we were gonna get our design underway. As I testified, we had gone out to bid. We had bid proposals in front of us to start that.
For the
design process.
for the standalone?
Yes.
Can you share the cost of those two? You haven't, yeah, you just kind of.
We haven't done a contract yet, and right now we're at a pivot point. The scope of work would drastically get changed from going from a standalone facility or verifying the plans and specs and bringing it up to code versus doing a summer boiler with propane and converting the existing boilers from number 4 to number 2.
I'm gonna, forgiveness before I ask the question, because I'm not looking to shoot any messengers.
Yep.
But it seems like we're in a situation because we didn't understand the requirement of bail when we entered into the MOU, the agreement. The mismatch of what steam was available to what we needed caused a lot of problems that we're dealing with now, and we don't want to continue. How do we know we got a handle on what it's gonna take to really fix the problem now?
I was not involved originally with the veil design and everything else. There were studies done. If the study that was done to be looking at the wood chips, operating at 50 PSI, even though the college does not do that. That's not to say, though, that it couldn't operate at the boilers, could operate at 50, and then you turn them down as the steam goes out into the field. The study also looked at, putting in a turbine and using the steam to generate electricity. So you do, low electricity off of it, and then that waste that comes out of it is at a reduced pressure, and that's what circulate around. I think that that's somewhat carried forward. But again, our design initially was to do a standalone boiler and not connect to the campus. Although the design was done to run the pipe to the campus so that we could, if need be, it was decided at that point in time to take the alternate deduct to remove this standalone plant and just connect to the college heat plant. I think during that time, people might have lost the difference of PSI and not even taking that into consideration, saying, well, it was designed to run a pipe.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. This time going forward, we know both the colleges has always known what they operate at.
Painfully, we know.
The
We know.
veil, we now know what we need actually for sizing, because we know our actually steam loads now. So that we can take into account when we do a summer boil. And the pressure can be dealt with also at that point in time, that if we were still needing the 50 PSI coming off of the summer boiler, that's what we could do. And the engineering that's involved is just another steam reducing valve, downstream to lower that pressure. So
Right.
ahead of that valve, 50 PSI goes to the veil. College runs at 40 or less, whatever they need to do. When they went on to the oiled fiber boilers that are there, that valve's actually dished downstream of that so that their boilers could also put into what's called the header pipe. Coming out of the boiler, all the pipes come together. That would be at 50 PSI. 50 PSI heads down to the veil. Steam reducer goes into the college. That's how that would work. So that's it.
And as Joe notes, there was a $5 million deduct on that particular project.
Yeah.
I think we all thought with the best of intentions that if it's possible and there's excess capacity at this location and we can do it for significantly less per year, that supports the state of Vermont and there's no harm in it. The challenge is knowing now what we do. It's not an ideal solution. And we don't have the ability to be able to just cut them off, nor would we want to.
Thank you.
I think at the time, there were a lot of factors going into building this lab. There was FEMA dollars, because this is a result of the flooding at the Waterbury complex where we lost the 2 labs. There were FEMA dollars involved in this. There was the overall cost of the lab. It was what, 24 million
I don't recall.
to build? There was the overall cost of the lab and how much was going to be FEMA, how much was state. And we're getting a lot of pushback from one of the abutters, one of the landowners, that really delayed the project for at least a year, if not 2 years. And I'm wondering if one of the thoughts was to help the concern from the land is not to have our own boiler there, because that only took up more space. And I'm wondering if some of that got negotiated to try to work through the landowner's concern. I don't know that
We didn't get to that point only because the landowner sold.
before.
And the new owner had no issues with.
Yeah, before we were actually
So I
building.
don't recall all the issues that the landowner had, other than a lot of it was visual. So it wasn't just a boiler plant. It was the lab itself.
And wasn't it noise? I think it was
There
also
was probably
noise.
some noise also because it was a camping area and they were concerned about that at night and all that stuff and.
It's right by the vets. It's right by the veteran cemetery. If you go down the hill, you go into the veteran cemetery. So it's at the top of the hill there, to the road. And it used to be, it's called the soccer field.
So below the
Soccer field.
It's a beautiful building.
That's a great view.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
But in large part, it appears that VSCs are kind of being the victim of just doing a good deed here. I mean, even if we were seeing a presentation for an HVAC upgrade at the Randolph campus, it wouldn't be this. Because this isn't really, this is for the benefit of the lab. So there may be some ancillary benefit to the Randolph campus. But to frame this as what's a larger priority for VSCs, I don't think is reasonable, because this fail project really isn't for the benefit of the Randolph campus.
What we have to weigh, though, is the age of the boilers. Because we know that boilers are gonna have to be replaced. So there'll be a state investment in terms of changing out burners. And then in 2 or 3 years, if those boilers bite the dust, can those burners be used or not? So we've got state dollars that are going into an old boiler system. And that is not what's happening.
I think the other testimony we saw is that this Vail steam support can't wait. It's like that's,
You mean the Johnson one?
no, Vail,
Oh, Vale.
because of its discontinuity in steam results in some really bad stuff happening in the lab,
Samples, yeah, and what, 250,000 each time or
which
something.
has absolutely nothing to do with the Randolph. But I understand what you're,
I mean, that's what we have to weigh, because we're using taxpayer dollars. We're using public dollars to help meet the needs that we need for our own lab that supports the public's needs. But we're also putting state money into machinery that the state does not own. That we know is getting to the end of its life if it's not already
no,
there.
I understand that. I understand.
That's what we need to balance as a legislative body and a legislative committee.
But the point, it's only, it's only an ancillary benefit to the entity that owns the equipment. The project, although it's that old equipment, it's not for the Randolph campus, it's for Vail Lab.
It's for both. It's for both.
But if those boilers die early, or if you do the conversion, and as Sharon is saying, hopefully we get 6 to 8 years, 10 years out of them. And I would say that's probably true. We do boilers, segue. Boilers themselves have life cycle costs of 20 years. Proper maintenance, they go on for quite some time. You can change out the burner. There are 2 boilers. You can change out the tubes, retube the boiler. And then you're only looking at the outer shell. The parts and pieces on that whole thing can be replaced to keep them going. And we BGS do that in a lot of facilities. We have old boilers. It's usually when, they're starting to leak is when the issue comes up. And so along those lines, if we do a standalone, we know where we're at. But if we do continue down the road and do just a summer boiler, the issue still is if in the winter they lose a boiler, that 17% that we're contributing will be coming out of the general fund to be paying for that also in the long run, for whatever that cost is for the years down the road. So we're paying.
One way or the other. Yeah,
I remember we asked this the other day, and you didn't know. How long will it take to find out whether it's 1 boiler, 2 boilers, all that stuff that Alice has asked about for the summer, like the details of the summer boiler?
I can ask, I don't know how far the college has looked into, whether there's 1 or 2,
Okay.
they may have an idea already, and we better have that discussion. and then come back with an answer. Or later in the session, probably come back with a WAG and say, this is what our best guess is. My guess, without knowing anything more, would probably be it's at least 2 boilers. Only because that way then each one runs 2/3, so you can still be providing some steam. And again, this is in the summer, so a little bit less. You're not providing heat, you're providing steam for dehumidification, for the autoclaves, and also for hot water. So
And so then for the boss over here, so it sounds like for this project, it's needed, it's necessary, but it's not ready to go. Is this something that we'll put off for next fiscal year, or that we're gonna flag to put in the BAA, or we're gonna put money ahead and say, well, we know they're not ready, but hopefully they can be soon? What is your guidance?
Well, it depends if right now you've had 2 bids that came in to do the standalone summer boiler,
yes,
right?
But we don't know if it's 1 or 2.
Right, we don't know the cost because they haven't signed into a contract.
right, well, and that is for the standalone facility.
Right, the
Oh, the standalone,
standalone.
standalone, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
we haven't, BGS has not done any investigation of the summer boiler.
Right,
Okay,
Technology plan.
so could the 2 bids that have come in, could you modify that RFP that went out to them? Or talk with them and say if we did, instead of doing the summer boiler, standalone summer boiler, if we did the proposal where we do it within VTC's facility and change out the burners in their boilers. With those 2 bids, with those 2 people to rebid.
They could I would recommend rebidding because the scope has changed. You're not looking at chip boilers and everything. Environmental, electrostatic precipitation. So that's propane boilers. It could be one of those sized, right? It's a stock item. You know, in the design of that goes relatively quick, right? But I had to do a little more homework to find that out for you.
So if you go out and rebid, say, I know, I feel okay. Which everybody's gonna be happy, I can't talk.
I don't know.
Well,
Exactly.
it's great.
Counting the minutes.
Glad I missed what he said.
You said you're gonna be quiet, he said he's counting the minutes. That's not a nice joke.
I go way back. If we now change our focus and decide to do the summer boiler within the VTC facility and change out those 2 burners, what is your time frame for going out with a new RFP to rebid it?
I could start that process right now. I think within 2 weeks, we could probably have an RFP ready to go out to the street for that. If the college has done a little bit of homework, that I already know roughly what that size is, we'd be all set.
And then you get the bids back by beginning of April, middle of April.
Yes, that sounds reasonable. If all goes well.
And then by getting those bids back, you'd have a better ballpark figure in terms of what the total cost would be. If you would be within the 5.3 million.
Well, I would know what the design costs would be. I wouldn't necessarily know what the cost of the new summer boilers would be, and I'd change it out from number 4 to number 2. But we can do a little homework and see what we come up with for an estimate.
But you're front loading it. Right now, you got 1.8 million. That gets you through design, right? At least.
Yeah, it should be. But again, I don't know what's involved with the summer boilers, but what the intent would be right now is if we could pull it off to have those ready to almost go midsummer. If they're off the shelf, ready to go, that would be great. But I need to do some more homework.
Would VTC be able to do that if they were off the shelf and ready to go and be installed during the summer?
Working with VGS, yes.
And would the summer boilers under that plan, would you also need at the same time to replace the burners? Or can that be done months down the road?
I would assume that we would stage that work, address the summer boilers first, and then make sure that we have enough plan. It's doubtful that the burners are going to be immediately available off the shelf. Maybe they would be, but doubtful. And we need to address lead time. And we have such short windows within our cycle to be able to implement things. So it may have to wait till the following summer to be able to do that work. But ATS would be assured that the Vail building would have its heat the following summer.
So going out to bid would be just dealing with the summer boilers. It wouldn't be dealing with the burners, replacement of the burners, correct?
I think that that was the plan.
Yeah, right, because it would also be addressing everything at once inside of the heat plant. The fuel.
From a design perspective.
So you'd bid it, but do it in phases.
Yes,
Okay.
So the whole bid would be summer boilers as well as the burner replacement
for design.
for design. Is that true, Commissioner? Is that?
Yes, and I apologize, Wanda Manoli, Commissioner for PGS, and working with Joe on this and also looking at the issue just around the heating plant in general for the college, for the upgrade. We have two goals and they have to align as we plan for this. The first goal is we need to have a system that supports the lab in the summer. And I don't know if Joe talked about what pressure we weren't receiving. So that's our first goal, because we have a lab that is having issues with doing some of their testing. So it's whole, but it's phased. So we have to address that. And we really need to address the summer, if we can, the lab before the summer kicks in this year. That's our goal.
That is correct.
And then it's planning.
Okay, stop there. You have 1.8 million right now. How far does that get you to actually installing the boilers?
And I think that's what Joe was saying, and I walk in, so I don't want to misspeak, but I think Joe's saying that we've got the 1.8 and we have the money that we've requested.
The 3.5.
And that's in 2017 or they're in 2016, sorry.
26.
It's 26.
26.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I've been working on repo numbers, so I just want you all to know what year I'm in this morning. So, yes, because we want to continue to advance, but it is a partnership with the colleges.
Yes, and we just haven't done the homework to know exactly what the cost of these changes would be.
Right.
So that we can get working.
So I followed until we got to 2016.
Me too.
So the 1.8 would definitely get you boilers installed.
It would get definitely design funds. I don't know how much it would cost for these boilers.
That's
Both
right.
of the boilers.
So the 1.6, what I believe Joe and that will get us the overall design, the large plan to meet those goals. And of that, we want to be able to use money to do the summer boiler and the additional funds. And that's the piece we don't know what the cost is.
Which
Right.
is what Joe's gonna get us. Right?
And you're,
Yes.
and
To
you're,
design the whole thing,
right, but you're gonna put it in
but
phases.
based on those priorities.
Right, so the 1.8 covers your design and some, you hope, of the summer boilers.
Right. And we don't know how much.
And you're hoping to have those summer boilers in this,
It would be, if they're,
if it's off the
if
shelf.
it's sized right, that they're off the shelf and we can find them out there, yes.
Yes.
Because all the steam pipes in place, it's electrical connected to the boiler,
Yep.
propane tanks at a boiler, you slide into place and connect it to pipes.
So there may be some money left from that 1.8 that could go towards some of those summer boilers. You're not sure, and that's why that 3.5 would be used from July.
Correct, Madam Chair.
fill the hole. And the question is, what is remaining of the 3.5 that will go towards the new burners? And what's involved there? And you will know that after you've gone out to rebid.
So we complete the design, we'll know what those costs are. We'll have estimates.
Soon.
So in FY 26, we have to make sure there's enough money there to pay for those summer boilers and the propane and the
And
installation.
the overall design.
And the overall
advance-
design.
Yes.
So it's not the full 5.3 million. But you need something in FY 26. And would you anticipate doing the new burners in FY 26? Or would that be kicked over to the next?
Oh, yes, I would, while we're there, do it all.
But you don't know what the supply chain, the
That is
supply issue would be.
But what could happen is if it's, if we could, because of delivery times perhaps, pre-order it. And then follow up on a bot for whatever that balance might be, if so. But I gotta do design and get an estimate first before I can say I need it all or parts of it.
Just to clarify, because two things have just been said. Is it we're designing everything and then doing it in phases, or is it we're there, we're gonna do it all? Those are two different things.
We're designing for both the summer boiler and the converter. Number two. Construction first on the summer boiler. And whatever funding is left over to move forward, if there's enough funding to do the conversion. If not, it would be to reserve that money and ask for additional funding to finish
As soon
the
as possible.
conversion. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Sure.
Just as a side note with the propane tanks, do you suggest putting them in the ground or leaving them above the ground?
I don't know how the colleges work, but with BGS, basically, if they're in the ground, we own the tanks. If they're above ground, whoever's supplying the fuel owns the tanks. So it go either way.
Typically at our college campuses, we try to keep things buried
So there you go.
because of students.
I mean,
There you go. Just, but typically, it's not always, but typically we try and make them,
Disappear.
yeah, less of a target, shall we say.
So,
Less, not to get off topic, but it's also a really nice, beautiful place and
Right,
you have a,
right,
just a big white propane tank.
right, right.
target. So between what you already have and the 5.3 million. So the scenario could be you go out to bid. You get a whole new price for doing the boilers and replace the burners. You would know that cost by the middle of April. End of April.
If all guards align, and I can put that up bid, yeah, I believe so, yes. Mid-April would be it. I might be off a week later.
I'm just trying to figure out the length of the session and when you'd have more information. Because what could also happen is those bids could come in a lot higher than the 5.3 million.
For design, it would not.
Hmm?
For the design, it would not be that high.
Yeah, but if you want to do the full work
Yes.
in the summer, as well as replacing the burners, which you could do in the fall, I mean, you're phasing. Again, you've got to order those burners, you just don't know how long.
I will not have estimates from design before you.
You will
I
not.
will not. We can do it back of the napkin and present you something.
I don't know, I keep hearing we're here all summer, so.
No, we're.
Did you get them by July?
We'll be out.
Is that
for the
when we're
20th
supposed to be
of May.
done?
We'll be out the 20th of May.
Madam
Dean
Chair,
has
are you
spoken.
trying to identify if we could move money into the next year, or are you trying to identify if we have enough money to advance this project? Because we do, from a policy and program, we have an issue at the Ag Lab, which I think they've talked to you about. And we need to focus that.
We're all in agreement with that.
Okay. So I'm
I'm
trying.
trying to figure the cash flow, and I'm trying to figure, is 5.3 million going to get you everything that you need? Or you're gonna need more by the end of the session, we have to find more money? Or, can we split up the 3.5 between the two fiscal years? Or next year you may come in needing a higher appropriation.
So that's really helpful.
So there's a lot of,
I think that if you could give us a little bit of time when we go back, we could break it out in that phase and try to align some dollars with what you're talking about. With the committee knowing, as Joe said, back and neck, and there are estimates, we're not doing estimation. We don't know what the environment on we might be able to do a couple phone calls and get some rough numbers. But to answer your question, do you need it all? And can you accomplish it based on the estimates? Could we phase it? But to respond to the way you were saying.
yeah, I just don't want to short, I think the
Right.
committee is on board. We're going forward with a summer boiler
Yeah, we just need to.
and changing out the two.
Absolutely.
I don't want to shortchange you. I don't want to, if it's coming in less,
We need the
I
money.
don't want to give you all the money,
That's fair.
you know?
So in other words, the sooner you can get us some beautiful numbers.
Yeah, I know, we're gonna take a break. So I think if you folks could go sharpen your pencils a little bit, make some phone calls, just give us some indication a little bit. We don't want to shortchange you, want to make sure that you can go ahead with the project. But 3.5 million, it's a big chunk. And so we can help you, but also we've got to put a budget together. Anything else before we take a quick break?
Oh, Calvin's here.
Calvin. Welcome, Calvin.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Okay, so let's take a, thank you, Sheena.
Thank you so much.
That's right.
You know, you make me cough.
There's your third visit.
Let's take a quick 5-minute break. Folks,